Hi, boys and girls. It's time for Chapter 13 and maybe even 14. We'll see how I do. Chapter 13 is called Art and Accusation. Last time we were reading, Patrick told Mr. Johnson something crazy. He told them about Little Bear. Mr. Johnson opened his mouth and shut it. At last he croaked out, "Mrs. Hunt, I'm afraid I'm not well. I'm going home." "Will you take charge of this child?" he said. And then Mr. Johnson let go of Patrick's arms, turned around, and walked out the door. The principal left the school. "Mr. Johnson," said Mrs. Hunt in a shocked tone, "shall I call a taxi for you?" No, I'll be all right." And the headmaster left the building without looking back and walked down the corridor. "Well," exclaimed Mrs. Hunt, "whatever have you been doing to that poor man?" Neither of them answered. Omri was staring at Patrick, or rather at his pocket, and Patrick's shoulders was heaving, and he was not looking at anybody. Mrs. Hunt was obviously flummoxed. "Well, you'd better go to the toilet and wash your faces, and then go back to the classroom as fast as you can with no toddling," she said. "Run along." Wow, can you believe it, boys and girls? They needed no second telling. Neither of them said a word. They went into the boys' bathroom, went straight to the wash basin, began running cold water, and splashed them on their face until their collars were soaked. Omri stood watching Patrick. Obviously, he was as upset as Omri, if not more so. Once again, Omri felt their friendship was trembling on the edge of destruction. He drew a deep breath. "You showed him?" he said in a trembling voice. Patrick said nothing. He dried his face on the roller towel. He was still gasping the way he does when he's been crying. "Give them back to me now, both of them." Patrick reached slowly into his pocket. He put his closed hand backward, and Omri looked at as his fingers slowly opened. Little Bear and Boone were sitting there, absolutely terrified. They were actually clinging to one another. Even Little Bear was hiding his face as they were both trembling. With infinite slowness and care, Omri looked at the cowboy and the Indian, and he said, "It's all right. Please, just know it's all right." Then he put them in his pocket, and he turned to Patrick, and he said, "You stupid fool." "I had to," said Patrick. "I had to. He would have phoned my dad. They'd have made me tell in the end anyways. Anyhow, he didn't even believe in them. He thought he was seeing things. He just stood there staring at them. He wouldn't even touch them. Then he gave a yell, and I thought he was going to pass out. He went white as a ghost. You saw him when he left. I don't think he even believed that he saw them. I think he thinks he dreamt it." Omri looked at him. "Can I have Boone back?" Patrick said. "No way." "Please, I'm sorry. I had to tell. They are just not safe with you. You use them. They're people. You can't use people." Patrick didn't ask again. He gave one more hiccuping sob and went out. Omri took the little men out of his pocket again and lifted them to his face. Boone was lying flat on the ground, holding his big hat over his ears, trying to shut out the whole world. But Little Bear stood up. "Big man shout, give fear. Small ears, big nose, no good, that man." "I know, I'm sorry that happened, but it's okay now. I'm going to take you home." "What about my wife?" said Little Bear. Oh, great, that's right. He forgot he had promised. Oh, Omri had forgotten all about that. Another Indian, another live little person to worry about. Oh, what was he thinking? Omri had heard that people had gone gray-haired over stress. In fact, it happened overnight sometimes. Now he realized that this could happen to him. His life was turning into a nightmare. Little Bear was looking at him challengingly. He had promised. "Okay, right after school we'll go to the shop." There was still another hour of lessons to get through, and fortunately it was another day where it was 2 periods of art in a row. In the art room, you could always go into a corner and even sit with your back turned to the teacher if you liked. Omri went to the farthest and darkest corner of the classroom. "Omri, you don't want to work there," his teacher said. "You're drawing in bad light. It's not good for your eyes." "Oh, I'm trying to draw something huge anyway," said Omri. All the others sat near the long windows. He was quite alone, and if the teacher approached him, he would hear her feet on the bare floor. He suddenly felt he must simply get a little fun out of this somehow. So cautiously, he picked Little Bear and Boone out of his pocket. They stood on the sheet of white drawing paper as if they were on a stretch of snow, and they looked around. "This school place?" said Little Bear. "Yes." "Shh," said Omri. Sure don't look much like school place I went to, said Boone. Where's the rows of desks? And where's the slate and the bit of chalk? And why ain't the teacher talking? We're doing art class. We sit wherever we want. She doesn't talk very much. She just lets us get on with our art. Art, hey? Say, that was my best subject. I was top of my class in art. Only thing was I was good at it. Still draw a mite when I get a chance, if nobody ain't around to laugh at me. Hey, do you care if I draw a mite on your paper? And he picked up a little stub of pencil that big. Omri nodded. Boone strode to the very center of the paper, looked all around the white piece, and gave a deep sigh of satisfaction. Then he knelt to start drawing. Little Bear and Omri watched. From the microscopic point of Boone's pencil, there developed a most amazing scene. A prairie landscape with hills and cactus, a few tufts of sagebrush. Boone sketched it all with sure strokes. He even put in a wooden building such as Omri had often seen in cowboy films. A saloon with a swinging sign that read Golden Dollar Saloon in twirly writing. A post office, a general store, a little stable. A stone house with barred windows that said jail. And moving swiftly on his knees as if he were drawing from one end of the street to the other, Boone even drew in foreground figures, like men and women and wagons and horses and dogs, all the trappings of a little town. From Boone's point of view, he was drawing something quite large, making the best use of his vast piece of paper. But from Omri's point of view, the drawing was minute, perfect in its detailing, but smaller than any human hand could possibly have made. Boone, you're an artist, Omri said. Omri breathed at last. Little Bear just grunted. Boone didn't trouble. In fact, he was so absorbed he didn't hear. But Omri frowned. Then he understood. Boone's town was part of an America that was not part of Little Bear's time. Boone, he whispered, what year is it in your time? Well, last time I saw a newspaper was 1889. There's my drawing. Do you like it? It's brilliant. Omri! Someone yelled. Omri jumped. His two hands instantly cupped himself over the two men. From the other side of the room, the teacher said, I see it's no use trying to stop you from chattering. You even do it when you're all alone. Bring me the picture you're working on. For a moment, Omri hesitated, but it was too marvelous to be passed up. He scooped the men into his pocket and he picked up a sheet of paper. For once, he wouldn't stop to think. He would just enjoy himself. He carried Boone's drawing up to the teacher and put it innocently in her hand. What happened then made for a good deal of the worry and general upset that the men had caused him earlier. First, she just glanced at it. At a glance, the drawing in the middle of the paper looked like scribbling or a smudge. I thought you said you were going to do something huge. This isn't much more than a... And then she took a second, more close look. She stood, stared at it. For about 2 minutes, she didn't say anything. Omri felt himself inside, huge, gleeful, uncontrollably wanting to laugh. And abruptly, the teacher, who had been perched up on her desk, stood up and went to a cupboard. Omri was not surprised that she was going to get a magnifying glass. She put the paper on the table and bent over it. She was poised. She examined the drawing for several minutes more. Her face was something to see. Some of the nearest children had become aware that something unusual was going on, and they were also craning to see what the teacher was looking at. Omri stood with the same innocent look on his face, waiting. This is what he thought would happen. This was the fun of having a little person. The teacher looked at him. Her face was not quite as stunned as Mr. Johnson's had been, but it was an absolute picture of bafflement. Omri, how in the name of all that's holy did you do this? I like drawing small, said Omri quite truthfully. Small? This is not small. This is microscopic. It's infinitesimal. It's microscopic. Her voice was raising higher with every word, and several of the other children now stood and crowded around and made small gasps of exclamation and wonder. The teacher's eyes were now narrow with astonishment and doubt. Show me the pencil you used. This took Omri back for a second. I left it over there. I'll just go get it, he said sweetly. He walked back to his table with his hand in his pocket, and with his back turned, he bent over, apparently searching the top of the table. Then he turned back, smiling, holding something in his hand. Here it is. Are you putting me on? Are you teasing me? There's nothing there. Oh, yes, there is. And she peered more closely. He could feel her warm breath on his hand. Don't breathe hard, he said. You'll blow it away. Maybe you'd see it better through the magnifying glass, he said kindly. And slowly she raised the glass into position and she looked right through it. There it is. Can I see? Can I look at it? Said the other children. The art teacher lowered the glass. Her eyes were dazed. I just don't believe it. It's there. How did you pick it up? Well, that's a secret method I have. Oh, yes, it must be. And you wouldn't feel like telling us? No, said Omri in a trembly voice. His laugh was on the edge. He felt like he was going to burst. May I be excused, he said. Yes, she said in a dazed voice. Go on. He took the drawing back and tottered to the door. He managed to get outside before the laugh actually blew out. But it was so loud, so overpowering, that he was obliged to go right into the playground. There he sank onto a bench and laughed till he felt quite weak. Her face! He had never enjoyed it so much. It had been worth it. The bell rang and the school was over. Omri brought out the men and held them up. Guys, I enjoyed that. Thank you. Now we're going to go to the shop. That was really fun. Omri ran all the way to Yap's store and got there before most other children in his school had even left. In 10 minutes, the place would be full of kids buying chips and sweets and toys and comics, and he had the store to himself right now. He wanted to take advantage of that. He went directly to the corner of the boxes with the little plastic figures, and he stood with his back to the main counter so nobody would see him. He was still holding Little Bear and Boone in his hand, and he put them down among the other figures. He hadn't reckoned on Boone's sensitive nature, however. Holy catfish! Look at all them dead bodies! There must have been a massacre here. Not dead, said Little Bear scornfully. Plastic. Too many plastic. You find woman. I choose, he said to Omri. You have to be quick, said Omri in a low voice, and he was already rummaging through the box, sifting through the Indians. There were very few, and of the 5 he found, one was clearly too old. One of them had 2 babies tied on her back, and parcels that were laced up like boots. You don't want to have one with a baby, I suppose. Little Bear gave him a look. No, I thought not, said Omri hastily. Well, what about these? He stood up 2 other figures on the table, and Little Bear jumped down and faced them. He looked carefully, first at one and then at the other. They both looked the same to Omri. One had a yellow dress, one had a blue dress. Each one had a black pigtail with a headband, a single feather, and moccasins on her feet. Little Bear looked up. His face showed furious disappointment. No good. But there aren't any others. Many, many plastic. You look. You'll find other one. And Omri rummaged frantically. She lay face down on the very bottom of the box, half hidden by 2 cowboys on horses, and he pulled her out. She looked the same as the others, apparently, except this one had a red dress. They obviously all came out of the same plastic mold because they were all in the same position as if walking. If the others were ugly, this one would be too. Without much hope, he set her before Little Bear and stood staring. The shop was getting busy now, and at any moment somebody would come up behind him wanting to buy a plastic figure. Well, said Omri impatiently. For another 5 seconds, Little Bear just stared. Then without speaking, he nodded his head. Omri didn't wait for him to change his mind. He scooped him and Boone up, went to the cash register, and said, just this one, please. Are you sure you only want one? He asked. Yep. Mr. Yap took the plastic figure, dropped it into a bag, and gave it back to Omri. 10 pence, please. Omri paid and left the shop. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He spun around. It was Mr. Yap. The look on his face was now not odd at all. It was a red, angry face. Now you can hand over those 2 that you stole. I didn't steal any. Oh, don't add lying to your faults, my lad. I watched you put them in your pocket. A cowboy and an Indian. Omri's mouth hung open. He thought he was going to be sick. I didn't steal them. He tried to manage, but no words came out. Then turn out your pockets and prove it. They're mine, Omri started to gasp. Likely story. And I suppose you brought them out to help you choose the new one. Yes, I did, actually. Ha! Come on, stop playing around. You know I lose hundreds of pounds worth of stuff a year to you thieving kids. And when I do catch one of you red-handed, I'm not likely to let it pass. I know your sort. If I let you off, you're going to be boasting to your pals at school about how easy it is to steal from Yaps. And most likely you'll come back tomorrow and steal another pocketful. Omri was fighting back tears. Quite a crowd had collected, much like the crowd in the art room, some of the same people even, but his feelings were no longer so pleasant. He wished he could disappear. It's no good trying to get around me by crying. Give me them back right now or I'm calling the police. And all at once, Omri was saved. Patrick was beside him. They're his, he said. I know. They're because he showed me them at school. Cowboy with a white hat, Indian with a chief's headdress. He told me he was coming to buy a new run. Omri wouldn't steal. Mr. Yap let go of Omri and looked at Patrick. He knew Patrick quite well because it happened that Patrick's brother had once been his paper boy. You vouch for him? Of course, said Patrick. I'm telling you, I saw them both this afternoon. But the shopkeeper wasn't all that convinced. Let's see if they fit your description. Omri, who had been staring at Patrick, felt his stomach drop into his shoes once more. But then he had an idea. He reached into his pockets and held out one hand slowly, and everyone looked at it. Though it was actually empty, the other hand he lifted to his mouth, as if to stifle a cough, and in it he said, Lie still! Don't move! Plastic! Then he put both hands together before him and opened them. The men played along beautifully. There they lay, side by side, stiff and stark, like little plastic figures. He gave Mr. Yap just long enough to see that they were dressed as Patrick had described before he closed his fingers again. Those ones aren't from my shop anyhow. All my Indian chiefs are sitting down, and that sort of cowboy is always on a horse. Well, I'm sorry, lad. You have to excuse me, but you must admit you looked pretty suspicious over there. Omri managed a sick smile. The crowd was melting away. Mr. Yap shuffled back into the shop, and Omri and Patrick were left alone on the pavement. Thanks, said Omri. It came out as croaky as a frog. That's okay. That's okay. Let's have a tofu. I don't know what that is, but it must be candy or a treat or something. They had one each and walked along side by side. After a while, they gave each other a quick grin. Let's give them some. They stopped, took the men out, and gave them each some of the chocolate. Oh, that must be what tofu is. That's a reward for playing dead. Little Bear then naturally demanded to know what he had needed to play dead for. Man, think Omri's still Little Bear? Yes. And steal Boone? Yeah. Omri fool to steal Boone. Ha ha ha, he laughed. And then he stuffed himself with chocolate and gave a dirty look. Where woman, Little Bear said eagerly. I've got her. When are we going to make her real? Tonight. Patrick gave him a look of pure longing, but he didn't say anything. They walked along again, and they were getting near Omri's house. Omri was thinking, and after a while he said, Patrick, do you want to spend the night tonight? Patrick's face lit up like a light bulb. Could I please? And see? Yes, said Omri. Wow, thanks. They ran the rest of the way home. Oh, I like that chapter. Chapter 14 is called The Missing Key. Let's go for it. Chapter 14. Omri's brothers were already sitting at the tea table when the two boys rushed in. Hi, what's for tea? Omri asked automatically. Gillen and Adel didn't answer. Adel had a funny smirk on his face. Omri hardly noticed. Let's make a sandwich and eat upstairs, he suggested to Patrick. They slapped some peanut butter on some bread, poured some mugs of milk, and went up the steps. How long does it take? Only a few minutes. Can I see her? Wait till we get upstairs. Omri opened the door and stopped dead. The white medicine cupboard was gone. Where is it? Gasped Patrick. Omri didn't say a word. He turned and rushed downstairs with Patrick behind him. Okay, where have you hidden it? He shouted as soon as he burst into the kitchen. I don't know what you're referring to, Adel said loftily. Yes, you do. You took my cupboard. And supposing I did, it was only to teach you a lesson for always taking my things and hiding them. Now you'll see how funny it is. Or not so funny. When did I last take anything of yours? Tell me one thing in the last month. My football shorts, said Adel promptly. I never touched your stupid shorts. I had to miss a game today because I didn't have them, and I got detention for it. So you can be grateful I'm only punishing you tit for tat and not bashing your face in, said Adel with maddening calmness. Omri felt so furious he even wondered for a moment whether it was worth bashing Adel's face in. But Adel was enormous, and it was probably hopeless. So after gazing at him for another moment with hate-filled eyes, Omri turned and dashed upstairs and almost fell over Patrick on the way. What are you going to do? Look for it, of course, said Omri. He was turning Adel's room upside down like a madman when Adel, slowly mounting the stairs in the direction of his homework, heard the racket and come running. He stood in the doorway, looking at the shambles of pulled-out doors in his bedroom, decutted cupboards and furniture pulled away. "You little swine," he howled, and he dived at Omri, and Omri fell to the ground with Adel on top. "I'll tear everything you've got to pieces till you give it back to me. Everything!" As Adel shook and pummeled him. "Then cough up my shorts." "I haven't got your stinking shorts," screamed Omri. "Are these them?" asked a small voice in the background, and Adel and Omri stopped fighting. And Adel, sitting astride, twisted his neck backwards to see. Patrick was just lifting a crumpled navy blue object from behind a radiator. Omri felt the anger go out of Adel. "Oh, yeah, how did those get back there?" But Omri knew perfectly well how. Adel had hung them there to dry, and they dropped off backwards. Adel scrambled up and looked sheepish. He even helped Omri to his feet. "Well, but you have hidden things in the past. How was I to know if this was different?" "Can I have my cupboard back now?" said Omri. "Yeah, it's up in the attic. I piled a whole lot of stuff in it." Omri and Patrick took the stairs to the attic two at a time. They found the cupboard quite quickly, under a heap of bits and pieces. But Omri had carried it down to his room again before he made the fatal discovery. The key! The little twisted key with its red satin ribbon was missing. Once again, Omri ran into Adel's room to find Adel uncomplainingly putting things straight. "What happened to the key?" he asked. "What key?" said Adel. "There was a key in the cupboard door with a red ribbon." "I didn't notice it." They went out and closed the door. Omri was now feeling desperate. "We've got to find it. It doesn't work without that key." They searched the attic till supper time. Never had Omri so clearly seen the point of all of his mother's urgings to keep everything in its proper place. The attic was just a sort of glory hole where they could play and leave a total mess, and that's what it always was. Only clearing spaces when they needed them for a new layout or some special game. And their way of clearing up there was just shoving things into more chaotic heaps. Underneath the heaps, they found a myriad of little oddments that were small enough to filter through the bigger things. Marbles, wheels of matchbox cars, Legos, tools, parachutes, cards. All kinds of things. At first they just raked through it, but then they realized they would never find anything unless they had a system. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. He found some boxes and they began sorting them into Legos here, water pistols here, tricks and novelties here. Bigger things they stacked neatly onto what his father rather bitterly called the shelves provided. Boys and girls, do you know anything about that? In a short time, the floor was clear except for a few odd things. "Where did all of this come from?" asked Patrick. "Oh, Gillen brought up boxes of it from the garden to make a desert scene months ago. We might as well sweep it up." He looked around, and despite his anxiety about the key, he felt a certain pride. The room looked entirely different. There was a real playing space now. He went downstairs and fetched a broom, a dustpan, and a soft brush. "We have to do this carefully. It'd be terrible if we threw it away with some of that sand." "We could sieve it," suggested Patrick. Put it through like a colander." "That's a good idea. There's a sieve in the garden." They carried the sand out in a cardboard box, and Omri borrowed his father's large garden sieve. Omri held it, and Patrick spooned in sand with a trowel. Several small treasures came to light, such as a 10-pence piece, but no key. Small treasures came to light. Omri was in despair. He and Patrick sat down on the lawn under a tree, and Omri took the two little men out of his pocket. "We're women," said Little Bear instantly. "Never mind the women. Where's the victuals?" asked ever-hungry Boone. Omri and Patrick fed them some more chocolate with a deep sense of misery. Omri produced the little plastic woman from his pocket, and Little Bear stopped chewing his chocolate the moment he saw her and just gazed with love. It was obvious he was half in love with her already. He reached out a hand and tenderly touched her plastic hair. "Make real now," he breathed. "I can't," said Omri. "Why can't?" said Little Bear sharply. "The magic's gone." Boone stopped eating too, and Little Bear exchanged a frightened look. "You mean you can't send us back?" asked Boone. "Never? We're going to live in a giant's world forever?" It was clear that Little Bear had been explaining things to him. "Don't you like being with us?" asked Patrick. "Well, I wouldn't want to hurt your feelings none, but just think how you'd feel if you was as big as you are to me." "Little Bear, how about you?" asked Omri. Little Bear dragged his eyes away from the plastic figure and brought them to rest on Omri. "Omri good, but Little Bear Indian chief. How be brave, how be chief with no other Indians to be chief too?" Omri opened his mouth. If he had not lost the key, he might have rashly offered to bring to life an entire tribe of Indians, simply to keep Little Bear content. Through his mind flashed the knowledge of what this meant. It wasn't the fun, the novelty, the magic that mattered anymore. What matters was that he wanted Little Bear to be happy. For that, he would take on almost anything. They all sat quietly out on the lawn, and there seemed nothing more to say. There was a movement towards the back of the house, and it was his mother hanging up some wet clothes. He thought she moved as if she were tired and fed up. She stood for a moment on the back balcony and looked at the sky. Then she sighed, and she was pegging clothes up on the clothesline. On impulse, Omri got up and went over to her. "Hey, Mom, you haven't found anything of mine, have you?" "No, I don't think so. What'd you lose?" Omri was too ashamed to admit he'd lost the key she told him to be so careful with. "Nothing much," he said. He went back to Patrick, who was showing the men an ant. Boone was trying to pat his head, but it wasn't very responsive. "Well," Omri said, "we might as well make the best of things. Why not bring the horses out and give the fellows a ride?" This cheered everyone up, and Omri ran up and brought down the 2 horses that had been in an empty box. Next, Patrick stamped about 2 square feet on the lawn to give the horses a really good place to gallop. Quite a large black beetle alighted on the flattened part, and Little Bear shot it dead with an arrow. This cheered him up quite a bit, but quickly he felt the same. While the horses grazed on the fresh grass, he kept giving great lovesick sighs. But Omri knew he was thinking of the woman. "Maybe you'd rather not stay the night now," Omri said to Patrick. "Well, actually, I'd like to if you don't mind," said Patrick. Omri felt upset. He didn't care one way or the other. When they were called in for supper, though, he noticed that Adel was trying to be friendly, but Omri wouldn't speak to him. Afterward, Adel took him aside. "What's up with you now? You got your little cupboard back." "It's no good without the key, though." "Well, I'm sorry. It must have dropped on the way up to the attic." "On the way up to the attic? Omri hadn't thought of that." "Will you help me find it?" he said. "Please, it's so terribly important to me." "Oh, all right then." The 4 of them hunted for half an hour, but they didn't find it. After that, Gillen and Adel had to go out to some function at school, so Patrick and Omri had the television to themselves. Then they took the 2 men out and they explained what the television was. I like that picture of the cowboy right there. I think he's in Patrick's pocket. And then down here in the corner, right there, is the Indian. And they're all watching TV together. After that, Gillen and Adel went to school, and a Western came on. Omri thought they ought to switch it off, but Boone in particular wanted to watch it. Little Bear was seated cross-legged on Omri's knee, while Boone, who had somehow gravitated back to Patrick, preferred to stand in his breast pocket, leaning his elbows. And he started to chew on a lump of tobacco that he had brought with him. Patrick, who'd heard something of cowboys' habits, said, "Don't you dare spit. There's no spittoons in here, you know." "Let me listen to 'em while they're talking. Just be quiet over there. I can't get over how they talk," said Boone. And before the 10 minutes was up, the Indians in the film started getting the worst of it. It was the usual sequence in which the pioneers' wagons are drawn into a circle and the Indians are galloping around them, while the outnumbered men on the wagon train fire muzzle-loading guns at them through the wagon wheels. Omri could sense that Little Bear was getting very, very upset as brave after Indian brave bit the dust. He suddenly leaped to his feet. "No good pictures." "What you talking about, Injun?" Boone yelled tauntingly. "That's how it is. My ma and my pa was in a fight like that, and my ma told me he done shot near 15-20 of them dirty savages. White men move onto our land, they use the water, and they kill the animals." I'm sorry, that should have been the Little Bear talking. "White men move onto land, use water, kill animals. So what? Let the best man win, and we won. Yippee!" he added as another television Indian went down with his horse on top of him. Omri was looking at the screen when it happened. In a lull on the soundtrack, he heard a thin, faint whistling sound, then heard Boone grunt. He looked back at Boone swiftly, and his blood froze. The cowboy had an arrow sticking out of his chest. For a couple of seconds, he remained upright in Patrick's breast pocket, and then quite slowly he fell forward. Omri had often marveled at the way people in films, particularly girls and women, were giving to let out loud screams at dramatic or awful moments, and now he felt one rising in his throat. He would have let it out if Little Bear had not cried out first. Patrick, who had not noticed anything amiss till now, looked at Little Bear and saw where his bow arm was still pointing, and looked down at his own pocket. Over the top of it Boone hung, head down, as limp as a piece of a knotted string. "Boone! Boone!" "No," snapped Omri. "Don't touch him." Ignoring Little Bear, who tumbled down over his trouser leg to the floor as he moved, Omri very carefully lifted Boone clear with his thumb and his finger, and laid him across the palm of his hand. The cowboy lay face up, with the arrow still sticking out of his chest. "Is he dead?" whispered Patrick in horror. "I don't know." "Shouldn't we take the arrow out?" "We can't. Little Bear must be the one to do it." With infinite care and slowness, Omri laid his hand on the carpet, and Boone lay perfectly still. With such a tiny body, it was impossible to be sure whether the arrow was stuck in his heart or higher up in his shoulder, and the arrow shaft was so fine you could only make it out by the minute cluster of feathers. "Little Bear, come here." Omri's voice was steely, a voice Mr. Johnson himself might have envied. It commanded obedience. Little Bear scrambled to his feet after the fall and walked unsteadily to Omri's hand. "Get up there and see if you've killed him." Without a word, Little Bear climbed onto the edge of Omri's hand and knelt down beside Boone. He laid his ear against his chest just below the arrow and listened. "Not killed," he said. Omri felt a big sigh of relief. "Take the arrow out carefully. If he dies now, it's going to be double your fault." Little Bear put one hand on Boone's chest with his fingers and the other on the side of the arrow, and he took the shaft out. "Blood come. Need stop hole now." Omri's mother kept boxes of tissues in every room, mainly so nobody would have an excuse to sit sniffling. Patrick jumped up and brought this, tearing off a tiny corner and rolling it in a wad no bigger than a pinhead. "Now it's got germs on it from your hand," said Omri. "Where's the disinfectant?" "In the cupboard, but don't let my mom see you." When Patrick was gone, Omri sat motionless and silent, his eyes fixed on Little Bear, still poised to pull out the arrow. After a long minute, the Indian muttered something. Omri bent his head low. "What?" "Little Bear's sorry." Omri straightened up, his heart cold and untouched. "You'll be a lot sorrier if you don't save him," was all he said. Patrick raced back with the bottle of Listerine. He poured a drop into the lid and dropped the little ball of tissues into it. Then he held the cap close to Little Bear. "Go on," Omri ordered. "Pull it out." Little Bear seemed to brace himself. Then he began to tremble. "Little Bear not do. Little Bear not doctor. Get doctor back. He know how make one wound good." "We can't. The magic's gone. I told you. You must do it. Do it now, Little Bear." And again the Indian stiffened. He closed his hand around the arrow, and slowly and steadily he drew it out and threw it to the side. Then blood welled up over Boone's checkered shirt. Little Bear swiftly squeezed the liquid out of the ball and pressed it against the wound. "Use your knife now. Cut the dirty shirt away." Without hesitation, Little Bear obeyed. Boone lay still, his face under it had turned gray. "We need a bandage," said Patrick. "There's nothing we can use for a bandage, and we can't move him to wrap it. We'll have to use just a little bit of a Band-Aid to help." Again Patrick went to the bathroom, and again Omri, Little Bear, and Boone were left alone. Little Bear knelt down with his head down. His shoulders rose and fell. Was he sobbing? Was it shame or fear? Or could it be sadness? Patrick returned with the box of Band-Aids and a pair of nail scissors. He cut a square big enough to cover the hole over Boone's chest, and Little Bear stuck it on with great care, and even Omri thought great tenderness. "Now," said Omri, "take off your chief's cloak to cover him up warmly." This, too, Little Bear did uncomplainingly. "We'll take him upstairs and put him into bed. Wish I had that key so I could get that doctor back," said Omri, and they walked upstairs. He told Patrick about the First World War soldier that he had brought to life to tend to Little Bear's leg wound. "We've got to find that key. We've just got to," said Patrick. Little Bear, still at Boone's side on Omri's hand, said nothing. In Omri's room, Patrick made a bed for the cowboy from a folded handkerchief and another woolen square cut from Omri's sweater. Omri slipped a little bit of thin, stiff card between Boone and his own hand, and on this he transferred the wounded man without too much disturbance. Boone was still unconscious. Little Bear silently stood by. Reaching up, though, he snatched the chief's headdress off his head and threw it violently onto the ground. Before Omri could stop him, he began jumping on it. In a second or two, the beautiful tall turkey feathers were bent and broken. Leaving it lying there, Little Bear took off across the carpet, running as hard as he could over the deep woolen tufts, stumbling sometimes, but running in the direction of the seed box and his home. Patrick moved, but Omri said, "Let him alone." Aw, Little Bear's done something wrong and he's upset by it. All right, that's chapter 13 and 14. We only have chapter 15 and 16 left. I'll read that tomorrow. Bye.